Hello, everybody. Welcome to Obsessed with Wine Live. My name is Wesley Cable, the host, and I want to welcome you to season number 2 of my podcast, Obsessed with Wine. Now, we're doing things a little bit different this season. Last season, we did all audio interviews. So I did the interviews, and then we prepared them and we made them available in audio form on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. Now, this year we're doing things a little bit differently. I wanted to make things a little bit more immersive and make the listeners feel like they're part of the interview process. And so we're going to do all of our interviews this season on our YouTube channel live. So live on our YouTube channel and on Facebook Live. So you'll also be able to get the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify like you did before in audio form. That will just be available a week later. So this interview, you'll be able to get that in audio form only starting on April 14th. So welcome tonight to the show. I'm really excited. I've got a very special guest planned for tonight. What makes this guest special is that I'm about an hour plus from Amador County in the Sierra Foothills. And it's an awesome, amazing wine region that a lot of people don't know about. And so I'm super excited. Tonight I get to talk to Lorenzo. I'm sorry. I get his name mixed up. It's Lorenzo Muslia, I think is how you say it. But either way, he's at Andis Wines in the Sierra Foothills. Fabulous winery, great place to visit. So I'm super excited to talk to him. So let's go ahead and get him in here so he can talk with us.
Hey.
Lorenzo, there you are. How you doing?
Pretty good there. Good to see you, Wesley. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And like I was just telling everybody, my very first wine experience ever was a trip to Amador. So my in-laws took me to Amador and introduced me to wine. I was not even into wine before. So they took me up there, and I was just fascinated by just all the beauty of the vineyards and just how great the wines were. And I really appreciated the stories that everyone told about how the wines got made and all that stuff. And so my wine journey was kind of born in Amador. So kind of similar to a little bit of your story, which we'll talk about in just a second. So the first thing I want to talk to you about, though, is I'm absolutely fascinated by you are the partner and the national sales manager at Andis. So obviously you have a lot of jobs and you do a lot of things, but I'm particularly interested in your national sales manager position only because on this program, we've had winemakers, we've had cellar crew, we've had lots of different people, but I've never had a national sales manager on. So I really want to know, like, what's it like? What's a day in the life of selling wine on the road for your wine, for Andis?
Well, it's a bit challenging, to be honest. I mean, think about this, that we make maybe 10 varietals and there are 10 and 10 million as the ratio. And there are so much restaurants through around the United States that have room. You look at a restaurant, they have 12, 15 options on their wine list by the glass, and that's where you want to be. So it's challenging, but it comes with its own perks. I'm traveling from coast to coast. My next trip, Monday, I'm flying to Atlanta and then to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii to Florida and Virginia and South Carolina and so on. So it's an amazing job. I really love because I get to meet people in my industry that we share the passion for wine. And we all see it from different perspectives. I mean, I am the producer and the seller and the storyteller, and then they are the story receiver, and then they copycat what I say, and then they transmit it to their guests. So it's like this phase of telling a tale that a small town in California, now it's popular in another small town in the other part of the United States through a bottle of wine. So it's a fantastic journey, to be honest. I can easily say that I've been in probably 40 states so far, and on all those 40 states, I can find a friend to have a glass of wine and a cocktail. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is. Now, I want to go back to one thing you just said real quick, though. You said that getting into these restaurants where they sell the wine by the glass, is that the goal is you want to get it into restaurants and in their wine by the glass program?
Well, that, I mean, the ultimate goal is that one: smaller boutique wine shops, and then the by the glass menu. Because not being a popular brand, the consumption, the consumer, when they sit at the restaurant, they go through the list, and then they, if they don't have, if the restaurant doesn't have that sommelier, or that guy that it's telling or inducting its own message to the consumers, like, oh, you should get this or you should get that. But if that position is taken away, the consumer, it's not going to flip through 100 pages of wine and boom, pick a Andis Wines. But when you're on by the list, so the selection is a little bit more limited, and everybody, it's willing to take the risk for a glass of wine. But and then when you are confident, and you make a glass of wine that tastes amazing, it tastes like it was made in any other part of the world known wine region. So that's why your confidence get boosted, and then it builds a little bit of more request on your brand. It's all through that. You got a funnel from thousands of wineries to those 5, 6, 7 that people will consume.
And I bet it's like a lot of things. It's kind of relationships. I'm
It
assuming
is.
the relationships you build with these, these restaurants, etc. I bet those are really important to getting your wines, where you want them.
That it's definitely, I if I had to divide it in a pie, and in, like, those financial pie, I would say that 50% of that pie, it's relationship with the person, and it has to feel that kind of like we like each other, what we're doing, or we share something in common. If it's a small restaurant, they feel a little bit of more happy to support a smaller winery. Or if it's a family owned business, they want to support another family owned, or a female owned operation, they want to support another female. So it's all about those little things that the relationship it started. But and then the ultimate message is through the glass of wine. If the wine one doesn't have quality, and then every that relationship just remains friendship. It's no more business into
Yeah.
that. So definitely friendship, and then quality, and then fit. I mean, you can have the best wine in the world, but if it doesn't fit their program, unfortunately, you can't force certain things.
Yeah. So last question on that real quick is, so how many days a year are you out on the road selling Andis wine?
So outside of California, about 100 days, so give or take.
Wow.
And actually, uh, the last person that asked me where you're from, I said from the Marriott, because
That makes sense. Yeah.
he actually was hesitant, like almost asking where Marriott is. So, and then, but if you put California as well, like Southern California, another 20 days here in California, up and down the coast. So yeah, I'd say 100 to 120 days, give or take, through
Wow.
the year. So, yeah.
So let's start at the very beginning for you then. Let's go back. And so you grew up in Italy,
Yes, sir.
and where wine was readily available to you for your family and everything. And I know you said this on the website. You just kind of, you just didn't think about it. It was just there. It was just part of your life. And for me, growing up here in California, my life was totally different. My dad drank beer and my mom didn't drink at all. And so I didn't have that experience with wine. So tell me a little bit about growing up in Italy with, having wine around, and kind of how you fell in love with wine.
Yeah, so I'm a Albanian heritage, that I was raised in Italy. So Mediterranean. So the wine for us, it's part of our culture. Is something that when you're a child, 9, 10, and you have a desire to sample it, to taste it, because you see the grown-ups doing it, it's never a taboo. I mean, my grandparents or my mom would never say no to me, and they would probably dilute it and to have us included, so we don't feel that we're secluded from that experience. Because overall, wine is it's a cultural thing that it when it's shared with friends and family, it becomes part of your social engagement. And so, as you said, yeah, for us, wine was always available. It was always either at the table, or at the if somebody wanted it in the house to grab a glass of wine. Uh, just got up and opened a glass of wine and had a glass of wine was never this like, oh my God, what time it is, or what day or week it is, or where
Yeah.
we eat. So it's like olive oil, salt, pepper, and wine. Those are the kind of the condiments at the dinner table.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's yeah, because like, I have 3 kids and, they haven't touched wine. They're not 21. They can't touch wine. It's kind of like the culture is so different what I'm
yeah,
used to than what you're used to. So, I think that's really
definitely
cool.
it's a cultural thing. Yeah, I have 3 kids too, by the way. So, and my
Do they
10-year-old
drink
daughter.
wine though?
No, I mean, I encourage them to smell it. I
Okay.
encourage them to, I don't want them to think that this is something different.
Sure.
And if they ask one day, can I sip it? I mean, in the house, I would probably will do it.
Yeah.
In a restaurant, maybe not, because the public opinion, it's quite
Yeah.
different.
Right.
It's a different perspective, but yeah, yeah,
So your education was not in wine originally. Originally,
no,
you got a civil engineering degree,
yeah.
which obviously is totally different than wine. But you also mentioned that wine. You always knew it was going to be part of your life someday. So explain how that all happened.
Well, quite honestly, going to study civil engineering was not 100% my choice. Was more like a family choice that my mom wanted, you know, some of their sons to have those major titles, doctor, finance, uh, you know, engineer and architect. So after a process of elimination, I kind of liked engineering because I'm a little bit of like numbers guy,
Hmm.
and science it's always I read for fun. So but wine, from when I was in college, I took jobs in restaurants and had to deal with food and wine and meat, and I was beverage manager in most of the restaurant I worked, or I completely managed the restaurant. So I always was in contact with with the chef, and then the sales rep, and getting to hear stories about how wine it is and getting to sip it. And it was fascinating. I mean, like, how something that looks so normal in a glass, just a red liquid, could have so many layers of flavors.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in engineering. I mean, you look at building and you're like, whoa, like how many like things have been introduced and blended together to create a building. In the same case, it's like to how many things you put into a wine to make it call a wine. So kind of like it helps me even today. My engineering mindset, it helps me be a little bit more logic, and every step I do, I kind of know where it's leading. So that's the thing that I still use it today.
So your passion for wine eventually turned into this restaurant that you opened up in Italy, correct?
Yes.
But it's an interesting story about the restaurant. So tell us a little bit about how that happened and
Well,
what
I mean,
happened there.
well, first, I'm in the heart, on the mecca of the Italian cuisine, in Tuscany, Florence, where, just to put it in perspective, there are maybe 2 Chinese restaurants, 1 Japanese restaurant, 1 Mexican restaurant, and 99.99% are Italian restaurants. So
Yeah.
uh, I just I like French technique cuisines. I like a little bit more, different twist, and I always want it to be different. I don't like to blend. I like to pop up a little bit. So, and I was lucky. I had the chef that I met, and he had the same principles, and said, like, you know what, let's just create a French menu in the heart of Florence, but let's just not give a French name, not like the Brasserie or Côté or whatever name. So we named it a completely non-Italian French name. It was named Brown Sugar Lounge Bar, because of the Rolling Stones song. So, uh, and soon it became one of the top 2 restaurants of Florence. It was a very successful story, but definitely something that I don't see myself going back to a restaurant. It sucks you in, and you're married to a restaurant, and it's hard
Yeah.
to live a family life.
Well, the hours are really tough. They're long, super long hours. Plus, like you said, if you have a family, you never get to see them. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of a lifestyle choice. So, all right. So then at some point in your story, you meet somebody from California who ends up being your wife. So how did that all come about? I just picture, you're in Italy somewhere and you meet somebody from California, and maybe it's not really that way, but how did that all happen?
Well, it was a late summer night. It was July of 2009, and I'm a big fan of Michael Jackson, of the music, and I he had just passed away, and I was going around with a fedora on my head, and we walked into one of my friends' kind of speakeasy bar where locals went during that time of year, because Florence, it's a very overcrowded by students and tourism. So we walk in, and sure, we see faces that we didn't recognize. And one of them was blonde, and the other one was this brunette. And my friend's like, "Oh my God, let's go talk to them." I said, "No, no, no, no. Like, I just want to enjoy my drink." But yeah, short story is that no, 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 I don't want to talk to her. Here I am, 13 years, still married, and best decision, best walk-in bar I ever done in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, we got married. We lived in Italy, and our first child was born there, until we kind of like wanted to adventure a little bit more in the new world, which was more my decision than my wife's decision. She still wanted to live in Italy, and she still today wants to go back to Italy, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I could see that.
But I'm
So
living the California dream, so.
yeah, no, I could see that. So, all right. So, how did you find Amador? So, one of the cool things about your story also is that you had this aha moment with this glass of, I think it was Cabernet Franc, even from Amador or from the
Yeah.
Sierra Foothills. Tell me about that, because that kind of put you on the path to what you're doing today, right?
Correctly. I mean, it's think about like how a wine of glass can change your life. Like literally, like it changed my life. Like every European, to be honest, I had no idea where Amador County or El Dorado County was, even though
Hmm.
I had just moved to Sacramento. And so the first 5 6 months, I took like a sabbatic after leaving Florence, and I got so bored home that I just needed something to do. So I went out and I met a restaurateur in Sacramento. He has two successful restaurants, and I met him at a wine bar. We're chatting. He's saying like, "I'm opening a French restaurant." I was like, "Oh, that's amazing," because that's what I had done in Italy. Short story. So I started working with him and kind of like learning a little bit the Californian style of running a restaurant, because I thought maybe one day maybe I'll do that. That's
Hmm.
what I did in Italy, and why not? So one day, out of the blue, I walk into the restaurant, and he pours me this glass of red wine, and I smell it, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" I was like, "What French wine is this wine?" I was like, and he started laughing. He's like, "No, it's not French. It's from
Yeah.
Amador County." And I'm like, "Amador what? Like, where is Amador County?" So I he told me the name of the winery. I went home, Googled it. Next day, I took my wife. We drove to the winery, and I was offered a job on the spot. Like literally, it's like, "Why don't you work for us?" And I was doing it on the weekends, Saturday, Sunday, and still maintaining my relationship and my job hunt here in Sacramento.
Hmm.
And then more and more, that weekend job became. I got offered to become a sales manager, and then from there, I had no idea. I mean, first email I sent out, I misspelled distribution. So that's how I was, and then 4 or 5 years later, I was offered to become a partner, and now work with a winemaking team and with viticulture team, and kind of like put a stamp. I could gladly say that this is my style of what I used to drink in Europe, and I'm trying to induct that into the California style and to
Hmm.
Amador and Sierra Nevada style. So, yes, definitely a glass of wine changed completely my life for good.
What an amazing story. I mean, as if the restaurant story wasn't great and meeting your wife wasn't great. I mean, that's an awesome story. So, well,
Yeah.
congratulations for that. So I'm
Thank you,
glad
Leslie.
that all happened. So let's talk about. So that was an Andis wine that you ran
Yeah.
across at that time. That's pretty awesome.
Yes. Yes. 2012 Cap Franc.
Wow. So then as far as your education's concerned, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is you got this degree. It's wine business management at Sonoma State, and
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with what that's all about. Like, what do you learn in a wine business management program?
So, everybody consider wine industry as from the winemaking perspective,
Yeah.
or from a viticulturist perspective. You grow
Mm-hmm.
grapes, ferment them, make wine. But there are so many steps that get overshadowed by these people that they're just focusing on making the best wine possible and growing the best vineyard possible. But and then having a coexistence between cost, quality, and representation of what people want. So that's where my job comes in between. So I talk to the growers and tell them that this is where we need to be, and then I talk to my winemaking team, and it's like, this is what we need to make. This is the direction. And then so we can put some products on the market that we have a story and a demand that people want. So it's like pretty much running it and seeing and being paying attention to what's the trend. Not that wine industry's trends are easily to follow. They're extremely hard, because think
Yeah.
about, it's trending now. If I start it now, it's going to take 5 years, and maybe 5 years down the road, that trend completely won't change. But like having a perception of what restaurants need, what wine bars are needing. I mean, and so that's why I keep an eye, and as well dealing with supply chain, with all the other things that gets into making a bottle of wine, because
Mm-hmm.
by the time a fruit get harvested and get put into a bottle of wine, there are 18 months at least. So there are a lot of steps that you have to keep in check.
So for somebody like me who's like a wine fanatic, I think just that program sounds like it'd be great. Like a lot of
It, I
interesting
recommend it.
learning to be done there.
I recommend it to a lot of people that are, not just describing a wine from its own taste, but to understand how a winery work. It's pretty
Yeah.
fascinating.
So let's talk about Andis now then. So you
Mhm.
ended up at Andis, and the winery was started by Janice Acuna and Andy Friedlander. And I remember when I was at the winery recently, and I had no idea this is how the name came about, but it was a mixture of their names. So it
Correct.
was let's see, Andy and Janice. So Andis. It's like a combination of their names, which is pretty cool.
Yes, it was Janice's idea, to because she wanted something that starts with an A, and then so that's why they blended their name, and it's pretty cool, and it sounds amazing. And she's an amazing human. She's our executive winemaker. After she retired from Morgan Stanley as a financial advisor,
Hmm.
she decided to get another degree and went back to UC Davis and finished the winemaking program there. And now during harvest, she works hands in hands with our winemaking team on the back. She's the first one to go to the winery, because to do the bricks and temps during
Yeah.
fermentation, you go in each tank to check what temperature are. That's like for us that we work probably the night before until midnight and waking up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. in the morning. That's not a happy cold. So she's been gracious enough to do that for us. But how winery was founded, it's fascinating, because uh, Andy and Janice used to live in Napa in the I believe late 70s, early 80s in Silverado Trail.
Mm.
Back in the day, that Napa, it's what Amador County is today. You found tractors on the road, and you walk into a winery, and you met the founders and the owners and the winemakers. So, but then life, they moved back to Honolulu, and that's where their career were mostly, because Andy is as a real estate agent in commercial real estate, and she's a
Hmm.
financial advisor. But and then in early 2000, their desire to go back to wine country spiked again. And then so they went back to Napa, and they saw that, oh, wait a second, the tractors now are limos, and then these tasting rooms are staffed with people that are pretty much just trained to say what, and you never get to meet an owner or a winemaker. I mean, not
Yeah.
everywhere, but
Sure.
most of them.
Hmm.
So so their dream Napa was kind of like changed, and then they came back to so on the way back to Sacramento to fly out, they met Daryl Cordy, Cordy brother, one of the greatest grocers and one of the best wine connoisseurs in Northern California.
Hmm.
So he took them in a journey to Amador County, and then they will never forget that drive. They drove in and they saw like, whoa, this is where our dream should start. And then they found this piece of property, this 25 acres, and then they decided to build something different, to build a dream winery, something that was never done before in Amador County, something that is
Yeah.
it's different. So and that's where their dream started in 2010. And I was lucky enough to meet them in 2014, and now we all four of us are continuing this dream that they started.
Yeah, so I want to ask you about something because I saw it on the website. There was a quote from Janice, and it said basically what you were just saying, which is that when they saw Amador for the first time, they saw the old Napa. And so my question to you is, and this is a conversation that I've had with other people who go up to Amador and have seen the growth in Amador. Is it gonna be Napa someday?
Probably not in my lifetime. I don't think we don't have the infrastructure to be. I think because of how Napa grew so fast, and then now they're trying to regulate it and protect it.
Yeah.
Well, in Amador County, there are so many uh, laws that protect from building massive hotels and
Mm.
resorts. Even though we would prefer a little bit of more hotels and restaurants, because overall hospitality and wine industry, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But no, it will never be. I mean, we are attracting a lot of Napa consumers. We're attracting a lot of Napa wineries. I mean, think about Rumbauer
Hmm.
is now my neighbor.
Hmm.
Turley, another legend, is my neighbor, and
Hmm.
rock star winemakers like Andy Erickson and Helen Kaplinger and so on the list. They so definitely, I would say maybe we'll become a Sonoma, where you still get to cruise through the rolling hills. You still get to meet some of the owners, and most of the wineries will always be small. I mean, there are some wineries, believe it or not, that produce less than 1,000 cases of wine, and that's their capacity. And
Yeah.
when they sell it, they put a sign at the door and said "sold out, see you next year." So that's how
Yeah.
it's going to be. It's a lifestyle. This is definitely, most of these people that own wineries in Amador County, they're not doing it for a life income. It's just for a lifestyle. And when is a
Yeah.
lifestyle, you preserve it because that's what you fought for.
Yeah. Well, at Andis, so you guys, like you said earlier, you said that they wanted to build this great place that was different. Now, if anyone who has seen it and has been there, it is totally different than anything that you see currently in Amador. So it's a really fascinating looking facility. And according to the website, it's got a 22,000 square foot state of the art winemaking facility. So tell me just a little bit about the facility.
Yeah.
I like the winemaking side. I really like that part of it. And, my experience working at wineries was always in that part of the business. So tell me a little bit about what's so great about, what you guys have there for the winemaking side.
Well, so the first thing, the winery was built with keeping in mind the ecosystem, and being part of the environment, and of the environment, and not abusing it. So it's built on an axis of east-west to absorb most of the sun during winter time from the facades, so it warms up the building, so you reduce the energy consumption. And then when in the summertime the sun goes above the building, so we planted 5,000 square foot of solar panels, which we actually produce energy for 11 months out of 12. So not only
Wow.
we fill our needs, we contribute back to the grid. So and then the barrel room, it's built to preserve its own humidity, and we used to have swamp coolers, but now we converted some of the swamp coolers into air ventilated, so we keep the moisture in the wine so into the barrel, so that the evaporation doesn't escalate. And then all the tanks are state of an art stainless steel, like the most recent modern tanks.
Mm-hmm.
They're all equipped with thermostats, which means that we keep an eye on the temperature, because the temperature in the wine, in making wine, it's a key component to create quality aromatic and perfumed wines. Otherwise, when the temperature spikes so high and not having the ability to lower it down, you kind of like confuse the yeast. And then some of these wines, we all tasted some wines that have no fruity character and are just spice. So and then the ability to crush everything in the facility, so the fruit come in the property, it get processed there, it gets fermented there, and then we move it from left to right, from fermentation to aging. So keeping everything at the property, it allows to control and maintain a quality check through the course of 18 months. And then we build it recently. We call it the warm room, so we can send the wine through malolactic fermentation, so to do it naturally and not wait for the next season and to send it through malolactic. So we really build a lot of equipments to maintain, to produce quality wines. And last year, the last edition we did, we converted our tanks into auto pumps, because I mean, as you know, labor has been a big challenge for our industry.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it's three times more hard, because every other intern that wants to work in the wine industry, they look Napa, Sonoma, and whatever is a position that it's open, we get like the last minute. So this last year, we made almost like a $150,000 investment to convert the tanks into auto pump, and to do a pump over, it takes about 40 minutes. And think about having 10 tanks, and you save 400 minutes in the morning and 400 minutes in the afternoon. That is a lot of
That's big.
time that allows us to do other things and allow us to focus on those little things that we don't want to neglect, because in wine industry, you have one shot. It's one vintage, and then you mess it up, you got to wait next year.
Yeah, and so for somebody who has worked harvests and
Yeah.
done manual pump overs, that auto pump over is pretty awesome, I have to say. I've done a 2-hour pump over once, manual pump over, and that's tough. I mean, even for me who loves doing it, it's tough. But
Well,
so yeah,
I have
I
a
can understand.
joke about that. One of my interns one time was doing a 1 hour and 40 minutes pump over, and he was so tired in the morning he almost fell over and fell in. So that's like I was like, okay,
That
we're
was
done.
me. Yeah.
So
All right,
yeah.
so just let's talk a little bit about farming there, okay? So a couple of things that I saw on the website that struck me that I wanted to ask you about. So um, it, a lot of the Zinfandel vines that you guys have are dry farmed, and I don't know if everybody listening understands what that means and how that works. So talk a little bit about dry farming.
So dry farming doesn't, just so make it clear for everybody, it doesn't mean that the vineyard doesn't get any water. It just, we rely on natural precipitation or underground water. So since these vineyards, most of our Zinfandel vineyard are planted in slopes. So and we are about 1,500 feet elevation, and the soils are mostly granite, so they're very well filtered, so the water goes down. But kind of deep underneath, there is a layer of clay, and clay, when it gets wet from the underground water, turns into kind of a cement and retains the water. So there is enough water underground, or at least it was until this year. So the vines now, when you don't irrigate them, you force them naturally to go deeper instead of wider, or instead of growing canopy. And then by pushing the vineyard to struggle a little bit and go find their own water, kind of like they go through multi layers of dirt and microorganism. I mean, there is a study that say in a 1 centimeter of earth there are 1 billion organisms living there, and those are things that help with the with the soils, and with the French call it the terroir. So the sense of place, it's usually more represented when you are in a drier environment than in a wetter environment, because the roots are the one that are shopping for all these flavors and bringing it through water, and with the photosynthesis create the energy that get distributed again back to leaves, fruit, and build more roots. So for a Zinfandel, for a delicate varietal that like the Zinfandel it is, having a dry farming regime or a controlled regime in terms of water, because some of the growers in the last 15 years, in the last 5 years, they had severe drought damages. So they put it kind of a drop irrigation only if it's below a certain number. If the vine is about to die, and then you kind of like have to give them a little bit of water just to survive. But that create a concentration and create this amazing flavors in these little berries that it's hard to replicate so it's been fascinating for us. At the same time, it comes with a severe cost, because uh, irrigated vineyard can produce up to 10, 12 tons to the acre. A dry farm barely produces 2.5 acres. I mean, 2.5 acres will do like rain dance if we get 2.5 acres, like 2.5 tons. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's quality over quantity in a few words.
So this has been a really wet year. I mean, the wettest I can remember in this area. So, what does that do for those vineyards?
So the weather in the vineyard, it's always affects the next vintage. So this vintage was already affected by last year. So it's uh, the rain. What is going to help we do cover crops, so we do a farming technique that we plant vegetables. So the vineyard are going to have a little bit of more nitrogen in through the rows. So so we're going to have a little bit of more growth. We hope so. We're going to have a little bit more growth, but
Yeah.
in terms of yield, are not going to be significantly higher than prior years. Since the vine already has established their yields, and it's a way that you can take one of their stems and dissect it, and you can count how many buds are breaking before that happens. So but
Wow.
for the next year, we're gonna have a successful, I mean, knock on wood, we're gonna have a
Yeah.
successful harvest and successful yield. But the rain so far are helping keep the soil rich with nutrients, and keeping the roots wet right now. It helps them it helps them like establish a little bit of more deeper.
Hmm.
So it definitely, the rain has been a blessing for us, because we were at the borderline where we didn't know if some of our vineyard will resist. I mean, last year our heritage block Zinfandel had a record low yields of like 0.8 tons to the acre. And think about
Wow.
this: it cost about $10,000 to farm an acre, so that ton of fruit costed almost $12,000, and then you
Wow.
only can make 2.5 barrels out of a ton. So
Wow.
yeah,
Jeez. Well, I'm glad it was. I'm glad we got the rain. Then I'm glad, and I hope that helps
yeah,
you guys. So one other
absolutely,
thing, just as far as the viticulture side of things, that I thought was really fascinating was you guys talk on the website about owl barns and how you set them up on the property. And so
yeah,
maybe it's only me who thinks this is fascinating. I don't know, but so if you just set these barns up on the property, the owls just come and then they just
yeah.
help keep the pests out of the vineyard. I mean, that's what it's all about, right?
Correctly. So it's a natural way of doing a pest control. I mean, from rats, rattlesnakes, gophers, and so on. Before a vineyard was planted there, like in the 1800s, because our region starts, the plantation starts during the gold rush of 1800s. There
Hmm.
were trees, and it was a flora and a fauna. So it was kind of the owls naturally arrived, and then when with the propagation of vineyard and ranches and stuff, so kind of like the animals get that get scared away. So we start putting these owl boxes and propagate a colony of owls, and then they naturally come, and because there's a lot of food and owls at night, we're lucky that at night it's nobody in the vineyards. It's quiet. It's very quiet for them. So naturally, they
Yeah.
naturally hunt, and they say that a owl family can eat about 2,000 rodents a year. But that help us, so we don't need to spray. We don't need to throw chemicals in the vineyard. So we keep that ecosystem. We practice sustainable farming, and that's what we thrive. Our number one goal is farm before winemaking, because if you don't have a quality fruit, and then you most likely will not have a quality product. And it is the opposite. Sometimes with quality fruit, you can make bad wine if you're not a good
Yeah.
winemaker.
You can mess it up.
You can mess it up in a few words.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. So before we talk about the specific wines from Andis and Painted Fields, which I want to talk about, I just want to just spend a minute here on the amazing winemaking team that you guys have there. So you guys have you have the consulting winemaker, Felipe Melka. I don't know if I'm saying that right or not.
Philippe Milka.
Yeah. I mean, guy is known everywhere for just all the amazing things that he's done. And then the other gentleman, I can't say his name, so I apologize.
Mayan Kushinsky.
Yeah, Mayan Koshinsky. So that's another guy that, I mean, these guys are really well-known, established winemakers in Napa, Sonoma area. And, so I'm curious, how does that all come about as far as getting a consulting winemaker, and, what do they bring to the table?
So it all started in 2015-16 when I was offered to become a partner, and now we're kind of going in distribution. So you need a rock star winemaking to go through the struggles that Amador County has in public uh, in national perception. So
Yeah.
you have making extraordinary wines is not enough. So you have to have the right team. So we went around, and I mean we interviewed this gentleman of Philippe Melka, which he makes wine for top 10. He made wine from Screaming Eagle, for
Mm-hmm.
Donna Estates, for his career starts in France, Chateau Petrus, which we're talking about like a $15,000 bottle of Merlot, and it was
Crazy.
brought here to California by Domino's. So I mean, we kind of like went around and asked him, like, would you be interested in working with us? And then when they came to our facility, that winemaking equipment that we had, it was like, wow, I mean, I can make something extraordinary, and doesn't necessarily need to be a Cabernet and a Chardonnay. And then we took him to specific vineyards that are as old as California as a state. We have a vineyard that is planted in 1860s. So those are little things that, for a winemaker that has accomplished pretty much everything. He has over 80 wineries that have scored perfect scores, like 100 points. So for him was a
Yeah.
new challenge.
Yeah.
And then he implemented a team, and then he brought Mayan Kushinsky, which is his partner and director of winemaking.
Mm-hmm.
And then we brought a local guy that oversees our day-to-day operation and works hand in hand with me, Mark Fowler.
Mm-hmm.
He is a viticulturist by education and a winemaking by training. So he sees the both worlds, and he's every day on the barrel room, every day on the vineyard and overseeing. So creating these three people together that they have one thing in common: to produce the best bottle of wine, but they all approach it by different angles, like from viticulture, from enology, from
Mm-hmm.
blending. Philippe and Mayan are master blenders. I mean, they take
Mm-hmm.
1%. I mean, I've never thought that 1% could mean so much in a bottle of wine. Oh my God! Until I've sat through these trial blends, and I mean, like 10 gallons in 100 gallons made
Yeah.
the wine completely different.
Wow.
So yeah, so that, I mean, that's where their palate, they have a master palate,
Mm-hmm.
and that was our goal. I mean, our goal was to make the best wine possible that Mother Nature can create from our region, and then these gentlemen are helping achieve that goal.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it while you were talking about. I mean, if you guys sold that as an experience where you got to go in and watch those guys at work, you could probably make a ton of money doing that. I
Yeah,
would definitely pay to see that. That sounds pretty cool. So, all right, so let's
we
move on
did
to the
one today
wine.
actually.
Oh,
Today
go
we
ahead.
did one, and we had customers stopping by and looking and seeing. Like there was a table of like 50 like bottles of wine,
Yeah.
and just duct tape saying lot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. I mean, it's fascinating. That's why I love, beside like selling wine and meeting people, but when you get to create wine, oh my God. I mean, it's just, it gives goosebumps sometimes, like, because you start from an A product and you take it to a triple A product. It's amazing.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. All right, so let's talk about some of these Andis wines. Okay, so you have two labels. You have Andis, which is the main, and then you have this Painted Fields label. So tell me about that, and what's the inspiration behind having that other label?
So the winery was founded as Andis, as we talked about, a blend of Andy and Janice, then and then in 2016, 15, 16, we decided to take this blend of Painted Fields, which originally was supposed to be the name of the winery.
Mm.
And so, but they opted for Andis. So it came down to Andis and Painted Field, and then we
Wow.
made Andis Winery, but we made a blend called Painted Field, just
Mm.
a generic red blend. In 2016, I saw the opportunity to take the Painted Field and make it a brand of its own.
Mm-hmm.
So initially, I made a white blend out of it, inspired by the Mediterranean coast, like Vermentino, Chenin, Semillon. And then we made a Painted Field Old Vine Zin as an homage to the regions, to the people that believed that Zinfandel could be a world class wine. And then the last one was the Painted Field red blend, which we call it Curse of Knowledge. So Painted Field for us is it's a blending. You know, when you think field, people think like field blends. So it's like we focus on blending white grapes or red grapes or old vine Zinfandel together, and create a different approach and a different perception of what Sierra Foothills potential it is to become a world class wine, and not necessarily labeled by one varietal. I mean, we have a Mediterranean microclimate, which is very unique, and we stretch from 1,100 feet elevation to 3,000 feet elevation.
Yeah.
Having this microclimate and different variation of soils allow us to plant different varietals. So we wanted, you can't be a winery and produce 70 different wine varietals, so
Yeah.
we but allowing to blend regional, like Bordeaux blend style, Zinfandel blend, or it allowed us, and we didn't want it to confuse people what actually Andis is. Andis is about the varietal correctness. It's about the soil, and then the single vineyards, and some of these varietals that made us popular. So we focus on like kind of like varietal and soil, versus Painted Fields is a little bit more of a regional perception.
So the first wine I want to talk to you about specifically is what we were just talking about. It's called Curse of Knowledge, and that's what I'm drinking tonight. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful wine. And so one of the things I want to ask you about is that you had mentioned, and I think it even says on the website something about that there's this feeling that Amador makes a certain type of wine, and the goal of this wine was to try to say that, hey, every wine in Amador is not the same. We can make, things like this. And so just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Curse of Knowledge, the name, it's like a protest name, to be honest. Is as a national sale manager, and I'm traveling from coast to coast, from north south, trying to sell an Amador product, and every time you go, and there is like a premeditated uh, opinion about Amador County on
Hmm.
being limited on producing. I mean, not just Amador County, let's say Sierra Foothills, like Amador El Dorado, and so on,
Hmm.
being limited in producing world class wine. And it just frustrated me because I never understood why, because I'm a younger generation. I'm like one of like the youngest generation to be a vintner in Sierra Foothills. So
Yeah.
I wasn't much educated on what happened in the past. I mean, as we all know, that Zinfandel went through some roller coasters from like white Zin to sweet Zin, overripe Zin, jammy, so and so
Yeah.
on. So mass consumers, they had like this, like, oh no 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 no, I don't want to touch any more Amador wines. I don't. So I like trying to convince them, but we make world class wine. Why would you give us a chance? So I felt like out of anger, I told like my wife, I was like, I feel like I'm cursed by the knowledge that is, but that's not who we are. So why I can't? How can I change that?
Yeah.
And the only way to change that is like make a wine, and when people try it, they're gonna go like, "Whoa, where is this made again?" So it's this.
Yeah.
So you said it correctly. My goal is to change the perception of what people think about us and elevate it and put them in a different category of we can make world class wine, and we've proven it left and right. So this is by far our most popular wine. We sell this wine in 35 states.
Wow, that's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on then to the next wine. Now, we talked about it earlier. It's the Cabernet Franc. Now, people who listen to this podcast probably are tired of me saying it's one of my favorite varietals. So, Cabernet Franc is like one of my favorites. So, not only was it important and it made a big difference in your life, but I actually love Cabernet Franc. But I don't see a lot of it in Amador. I think, and you would know better than me probably. There're just not a lot of wineries who sell it. So, why
Yeah.
is that? And just tell me a little bit about that wine.
Well, so mine, I mean, yeah, as you said, Cab Franc changed my life. I probably easily could have been working in Napa or opening a restaurant, and here I am
Hmm.
running a winery in the Sierra Foothills. So, Cab Franc, unfortunately, for decades, people misunderstood the varietal. I think because of like the similarities to Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and how
Yeah.
many times people say, like, I want a cab, not necessarily specifying it, because in their mind they're thinking Cabernet Sauvignon.
Hmm.
But then when people start thinking Cab Franc, which is so delicate and so different, I mean, I tell people, if you're a fanatic of Cabernet Sauvignon, and then you probably will misunderstand Cab Franc. But if you truly like red wine, Cab Franc, it's like that the diamond point of the red grapes. It's hand on hand with Pinot Noir. It's one of the most delicate and most difficult wine to make it correctly. So that's a reason why you don't see it a lot, because not every winery has the ability and the technique, and it's a very finicky varietal.
Mm.
When not farmed properly and not planted at the right elevation and the right soils, it kind of like show up. It's one of those varietals that shows up the poor winemaking or the poor viticulture behind it. So that's why a lot of people have stayed away from it, have stood away from it, or use it as a blending, because
Yeah.
a little bit of Cab Franc goes along with Cab Sauv and Merlot and Cab Franc and so on.
Hmm.
But for us, Cab Franc it's the flagship winery, and this vineyard is planted almost 3,000 feet elevation in volcanic soil. We ferment the wine under temperature control to preserve that earthiness. And then we age the wine for 18 months in up to 25-30% new French oak, where the oak kind of add a kiss of like those oaky character and makes this wine a world class. By far, it's our most accoladed wine. I mean, this current vintage just scored 93 points out of 100.
Wow.
That for a winery at our size, from where we are, that's just like winning the Oscar on the Cab Franc, because we're competing on world class monsters that makes Cab Franc that cost up to $300 a bottle, and ours it's a tenth of that price.
So in one sense, it's actually elating. Like, wow, look at this. We're doing so great. And then it's probably frustrating at the same time. Like, here we are, this small winery. Like, if only more people knew we were here making this great wine, right? I mean, that's kind of
Exactly.
what you're going through right now.
Yes, exactly. Yes, it is 100% correct. If that would be a sentence to
And you get
define.
that every day because you're out selling it. So you have to do that. All right. So I want to ask you about a white varietal that you guys make. It's a Semillon, and it's another one of those wine. Like I said, I worked at a winery before in Napa, and we made Semillon, and but I don't see it a lot of places, and I don't know how many people have even had a Semillon before. But everybody in Amador talks about how great the Andis Semillon is. And so, can you tell us a little bit about that? Now, I know I was talking to you earlier, and I told you last time I went to Andis, they were sold out, so I wasn't even able to buy any. But tell me a little bit about the Semillon and what so makes it so popular.
Hey, now, Wesley, now that we're friends, for you, will never be sold out. You just,
Okay, good. All right.
I
I've
always
got
say
connections now, yeah.
a bottle of two for myself. You know, Semillon is a Bordeaux varietal, very popular in France, in the Bordeaux region, usually mostly blended with Sauvignon Blanc. Another region that is making it popular is the South Hemisphere, Australia. So Semillon actually was planted in our region by a gentleman with the name of Bill Dillion, which his twin brother owned a winery called Dillion Winery. So one is the winemaker, the other one is a farmer. And so he planted this varietal in the 60s, which makes it one of the oldest white varietals planted in a predominantly red wine region. And so he struggled for almost 30 years to sell it because people did not know how to make it. It's not a history, it's not a pedigree of winemakers making Semillon, so you have a database. And it's a very finicky varietal. If you treat it as a Sauvignon Blanc, it gets very bitter. If you treat it like a Chardonnay, it becomes too buttery. So it's you never know which way to go until you learn and try out. So short story was that in 2009, when the winery was getting built, Bill, that is as well a contractor, shares with us and saying like, hey, I am working this weekend. I'm touring up the Semillon vineyard. And we're like, oh my God, just please give us a chance. Bill, we're 3 months away from harvest. Like, oh, I'm so sick of just not harvesting so many years. I farm it and nobody wants to buy it. And I don't want to sell it for pennies on the dollar. So we begged him and I said, let us make one vintage, just 1 year. Worst case scenario, we'll help you replant it next year. So we made that wine with the ideas like, okay, we'll blend it to Sauvignon Blanc and we'll make a Bordeaux wine, classic. Oh my God, like when we were tasting the wine, it was like, this is the best white wine that we could ever had made. And since that wine, it not only that put Bill Dillion on the map as a quality grape grower, there is a list now of 10 other wineries, and 4 of them are world-class wineries that are waiting for us to fail so we can give back the Semillon. But not only when we don't even have a contract, we just literally have a handshake with Bill. His name is on the label. We've been making Semillon since 2010, and we'll make it for as long as we keep our lights on, because it's by far one of my favorite white wine to drink. Actually, as a matter of fact, when I'm done with podcast tonight, I want to have a glass of Semillon. So
you're lucky.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a great story. See, that's the kind of thing you just can't get unless you listen to a show like this, right? You can't get those stories. So that's pretty awesome. So a couple of more things I just want to ask you real quick here is, for Amador County, there's a lot of Barbera. Everybody makes a Barbera, it seems like, but you guys also make a Barbera. And I think from last time we were at the tasting room, they said it's one of your most popular. Maybe it's the flagship wine or whatnot. So talk a little bit about the Barbera.
Yeah, so the second most planted grape in our region, besides Zinfandel and old vine Zinfandel, it's Barbera. Introduced in our region, which not a lot of people know, but very, very, very early. The first plantation of Barbera in Amador dates back to the 1896, but was never used as a varietal actually until the early 80s. But so Barbera in our region, there are so many schools of winemaking. There are those that makes it that more riper and more jammier, and then there are the one that makes it a little bit more oaky and more, because they're trying to show the muscle part of it. For me, as an Italian, I mean, as an Italian trained and as an Italian Italian culinary experience, I like Barbera for its freshness. I like it when it's more similar to a Pinot Gamay style. And as a matter of fact, in 2000 Uh, 16, I changed the glass shape from a Bordeaux glass shape to a more burgundy, where you express a little bit more the feminine part of it. So our Barbera, it's the most food friendly varietal we make, because we make it in that very close to European style, driven by acidity, driven by freshness, driven by bright fruit. It's a wine that you can pair it with a variation of cuisines that have a tomato base or a cheese base. Best pairing by far would be a plate of pasta and tomato, or a pizza. And yes, it's our number one wine. There are like several restaurants, like world class restaurants in Sacramento, like from Spanish Bottega Aioli to Mulvaney to the Rhine, and Fornaio, like the Italian restaurant. They used to have our Barbera. So it's a it's my favorite wine to drink, to be honest, not just because the Italian part of it, but it's a wine that doesn't fatigue me. I mean, you can have a glass of wine or two, and then you can move on to a bigger wine, and your palate is still going to be ready for anything else. It's a
Yeah.
transition or introduction wine.
Well, you were generous enough to send me a bottle of that Barbera, so I will enjoy that then, and I'll let you know how that goes. All right, so the last wine I want to talk to you about is one that was introduced to us last time we were at the tasting room, my wife and I, and it's the Shake Ridge Ranch Zinfandel from the Sierra Foothills. So, and the lady behind the counter, and I'm sorry I don't remember her name, but she was fantastic. But she was trying to tell us about this wine and just how great it is, and you know how we had to try it, and it just happened to be on sale that day, and so we or for sale. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that day. So we bought some. So anyway, talk a little bit about the Shake Ridge Ranch Zinfandel. Like you said, up in Amador, everybody makes a Zinfandel, and I've actually had this one, and I really like this one. So talk about this one.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So Shake Ridge Vineyard, it's farmed by one of the top viticulture female viticulturists in the United States. Her name is Ann Kramer, where 90% of her fruit, believe it or not, gets sold to the Napa, Sonoma, and Southern California winemakers. I mean, I'm talking about like world-class winemakers. That tells you the quality of her vineyard.
Yeah.
She farms like she farms like it's like a parent raises their children, like with delicatesse, with attention to details. And uh, during the fermentation and post fermentation, she came 2-3 times to make sure that how the fruit is fermenting and how is it going, is it to your liking, and did we pick it at the wrong time. I've never met another grower that just so her job doesn't end just by selling the fruit, but like it's always involved, because you want to make sure that that wine is turning to the best option. And the way we ferment it, we're lucky actually. A side story: the winemaker Mark Fowler that worked for us, he was an internship and actually worked with Ann Kramer 15 years ago.
Wow.
So for us to buy Shake Ridge Zinfandel and allow him to make, it was like a circle that just you just finished it, and now you have I saw this vineyard getting planted, and now I'm making wine from it. And it's our favorite wine to make. We make it in a very old school way. The wine is fermented native, so it's on native yeast, because we trust the farming and the winemaking, the farming from the vineyard. And the wine is like gently transported from stainless steel tanks to wood tanks, and those tanks, 20% of them are French oak, that kind of like round and add a little bit of more secondary notes, more like tobacco and leathery, and kind of like make the Zinfandel to elevate it to a second degree, and not just like a juicy wine, but now like a juicy wines with a little bit of muscles. But it has a perfume to me. Sometimes actually, blind taste, it reminds me of perfumes of the Pinot Noir, like that. But that how delicate the wine, and it probably, if you look it on the color, it's like you can see through a Zinfandel, because it's such a delicate wine.
Yeah.
And another wine that scored very highly on the from the critics. So it tells you the potential that the Zinfandel have on our region when it's made properly.
Yeah, if you haven't had this wine, this Shake Ridge Ranch Zinfandel from Andis, I recommend that you try it. I mean, it's really something special. I really enjoyed it, and my wife too. So, all right, so I've got a couple more questions for you as we near the end of the interview. I really appreciate your time. You've been awesome so far. So, Andis has one of these programs that's a wine on tap program,
Yes.
which is super cool, and you don't see that everywhere. And I think what I liked is when you see it on the website, they talk about how it's all about helping out with sustainability and all that other stuff. It's so tell me about the Wine on Tap program, because I
Yeah.
think it's awesome.
Well, thank you. You know, I mean, as I mentioned before, our number one goal, beside making wine, is to to be sustainable. And there are statistics that people tell, like when they buy a bottle of wine, they're drinking it in within 2-3 days. Certain varietals, not all of them, but so we kind of like, well, why not offer that option to reduce carbon footprint? I mean, because yeah, we farm organically, sustainably, but and then we buy glass from China
Yeah,
and from Chile, and then that
sure.
glass, you know. Uh, so it's like, well, let's just come with a program where at least for locals that live in within 40, 50 miles that frequent this region once a month, well, let's offer them the opportunity to come taste fresh wine and bring it home and drink it on the weekend without the need of getting a glass and just throwing it away. So it's a
Yeah,
waste. It's just like creating waste on this planet that we're making it very difficult for the next generations. So
yeah.
it came like that, and I mean it's a very old school. And in Italy, in Europe, that's a very similar. I remember on my 20s, I would get on my motorcycle. I didn't have much money to buy bottles of wine, or I would just get in a motorcycle and go to a winery and fill up a jug and just go back home. And that most
Wow.
of the time that's the best wine because it's fresh, it's
Hmm.
not mostly manipulated, and it's ready to consume. And it, yeah. So that's our part. That's our goal. Is just help Mother Nature and the planet on reduce this carbon footprint and be a little bit more environmentally open to educate even other generations that a waste is a waste, but there are ways to
Yeah.
limit it, and this is one of them. And actually this year we're actually reducing the weight of our glass by 15%. So that's part again of like become a little bit more sentimental towards the environment and environmental.
So, one quick question on the wine on tap. What kind of wine do you get on tap? What is your? Do you have a
A
choice or?
rotational it's a rotational thing. There are months that one of the other part things that I do at the winery when we experiment with blends,
Hmm.
but not we can always bottle 50 cases of wine. It takes like a big cost.
Yeah.
So like experimentation that we do it this year, we put the basis for the following year. So now we know in the next 2-3 years we can do it at a bigger scale, was so that the consumers get the opportunity to try the base of like the genesis of one blend. And so that's like it's always changes.
Hmm.
Right now we have a baby curse of knowledge. I mean, it's the first base that we did of curse of the red blend. And sometimes we have barbera, sometimes we have like this delicious zinfandels, and it just rotates. It's and every time people try it, that we have people that walk in and it's like, you know what? I don't care what it is. Just fill me a
Just
carafe.
fill it
Just
up. Yeah. And
fill
it's
it
like
up because I know it's good.
$15. It's like super cheap, right?
Yeah.
$15? Yeah,
Yes.
that's pretty cool. Well, I kind of look at it as, well, these are wines that I can't get in the bottle, so
You
I can get it in my bottle. So that's cool, right? That's just trying something different. So, all right. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is tomorrow is a big day for you guys. You guys have a spring release party, and you also have a release of a Brut Rosé made from Barbera, and
can.
it's like just in time for rosé season. So it's almost like the perfect timing on that. But it's the first time you guys have introduced that wine. So talk about that.
Yes. So I'm a big fan of sparkling wine, and especially brut wines. I love French champagne. I love Italian Franciacorta. I love good, elegant prosecco. So uh, during a period of history called COVID,
Hmm.
where I was pretty much, I mean, affected 100%. Now from 100 days on the road, now I have 100 extra days.
Yeah.
So I'm at the winery, and so I had my dream was always to make a sparkling wine, to make my own sparkling wine, not just buy a sparkling wine and put a label.
Hmm.
So I go to my winemaking team, and I sit down with them. I said, "This year I want to make sparkling wine," and they all start laughing. I said, "No, no, I really want to make sparkling wine." And
Yeah.
it's like in Amador County. I said, "Yeah." So I said, "Why not? We have the IQ and the knowledge and the technique. So let's just do it." So we started. We use Barbera because Barbera has ability to retain acidity at its younger age, and acidity on wine. It's perceived as freshness, as like that lemon zest. And I do like white wines or sparkling wine when you put it on the palate, and then you get that juiciness and that lemon zest.
Hmm.
So we started the base. We made this base of rosé at the winery, and then we contacted a winery in Napa that has the proper equipments, because it's a different way to make carbonated wine and a
Yeah.
different way to make still wine, because you need
Hmm.
tanks. And so, and then every week and every month that was passing, I mean, I could see this thing change and evolve to this world class sparkling wine. And I've shown around, and people were still have a hard time believing that actually that is an Amador fruit. They think that I bought bulk wine somewhere else, but it's
Yeah.
100% Barbera, and I believe we might be one of the first Barbera sparkling wines in the world, actually. And it's bone dry, it's crispy. If I didn't tell you that that wine was made in Plymouth, you probably would confuse it with the champagne, because it has like this very fine little bubble that dissolves on your palate.
Hmm.
So tomorrow, actually, we partnered with a food truck, the famous Cousin Maine Lobster.
Yeah.
So it's like fish, lobster, and champagne. I mean, it feels like paradise in Amador County. So you, Wesley, are invited if you would like to join, be my guest.
I would love to. I absolutely
Please.
would love to. So that's well, that is awesome. And so,
Yeah.
I just want to say, Lorenzo, you've been awesome. Thank you so much for all this time. I mean, we've taken a whole bunch of time, but
Oh, yeah, my pleasure.
like I said before, sports teams, they have their like home court and all that stuff. Well, like my home wine region is Amador, and so I have a affinity for Amador, and so that's why I'm so happy to have you on here to talk about Amador. And like you out all over the country spreading the word about Amador. I hope people who are listening to this who haven't experienced the great wines that are coming out of Amador, and it's such an amazing value compared to other
Oh, yeah.
wine regions that you can buy wine. I mean, when I looked at the prices on some of these wines, I was blown away, like how much of a great value they are. So Lorenzo, you're the best. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for your time. I appreciate it. If people want to, check out Andis Wines, I recommend that you do. Just go to their website, which is just andiswines.com for more information. And Andis is spelled Andis. So andiswines.com, and you will not be disappointed. Now, if you live near there or you're going to be in the area, I absolutely recommend that you go there. It is a beautiful facility. And one of these days, my goal is that I can get my name on that board of all the wine club
Absolutely.
members. That is pretty cool. Every time I go there, I look at all these names. But anyway, so andiswines.com, go to andiswines.com and check out their
Thank
wines.
you,
So
Wesley. I mean, I
you're
appreciate
the
it's an
best.
honor. It's an honor for us to be in this platform. So thank you for being a voice for the wine industry, but especially a voice for our region that needs a lot of love. So thank you so much, and I look forward to see you in person soon.
Yeah, excellent. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow. That would be really awesome.
Well, please, I would love to. I would
Okay.
love to.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Take care, Lorenzo. You're the best. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye
Cheers.
bye. Cheers.